Welcome to Good Thinking. Hopefully this is getting started right at the top of the hour. There is a slight delay in the simulcast, so if you respond and we're all having an interaction and I'm a little delayed in responding to you, it's due to the wonderful world of live streaming. Welcome to Good Thinking. Let me know that you're here. Let me know who you are and where you're from. This is the show, the weekly show, most Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific time in the US, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, where we spend just a little bit of time, hopefully no more than 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, working on stealing that time away from all the time that we spend being told what to think or focusing on what to think, to devote a wee bit more time to improving how we think. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you are here on LinkedIn, you know to tune in on LinkedIn Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific time. But we are also streaming live on YouTube. So if you are not subscribed on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, Becky Saltzman. And if you want to get notifications, you can manipulate that little bell button to give you notifications of the show. So let me know that you're here, who you are, and where you're from. This is round 2. And so what we're doing today is sharing some of the most interesting findings from the conference, the international conference that I attended, not last week, but the week before, for the International Society for Judgment and Decision Making. And here's the cool thing. A lot of scientific research, stuff that we could really apply to our everyday lives, particularly when it comes to judgment and decision making, because that's like really applicable to our everyday lives. But a lot of this research is sequestered behind closed access academic publications. So going to these conferences and getting this information kind of pre-published does one of two things. One, it gives us inside scoop, which is what we're going to get today. And two, it also, there comes with a little warning because some of this research has not been fully vetted through the process. So you don't want to make decisions, hardcore decisions, based on behavioral economics or behavioral science research that is not quite there yet. But this will give us some good insights into some of the direction in the realm of judgment and decision making. So Stephen says, greetings from 32 miles northeast of Pinot Paradise. Okay, does anyone know where Pinot Paradise is? Now I'm assuming you're referring to Pinot Noir wine. Is that what it is? Does anyone know where Pinot Paradise is? Well, if you see Stephen Saltzman and you know where I am, that might be a little hint. Anyway, all right. So last week, I brought up two things that we didn't kind of close the loop on, which I think will be fun. One is the heading of last week's show called Seeing is Believing. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. Seeing is believing and believing is seeing. What do you think that means? Seeing is believing and believing is seeing. Maybe the second half points to a potential bias. All right, we've got Tintu. Hi, Tintu, where are you from? Let us know. Tintu on LinkedIn Live. Welcome to the show. All right, last week I also asked another question, and then I never circled back to it, which was really bad. And so I'll ask it again, and anyone who gets the right answer, actually anyone who attempts to answer, gets at least one rubber chicken. One rubber chicken. All right, so here's the question. Are you ready? The grandfather of behavioral economics, Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman, he wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. I work with Amos Tversky. He identified all the heuristics or rules of thumb and biases that kind of show that we don't behave as rationally as we think. A lot of research has been built upon his research. But he referred to one bias as the granddaddy of all the biases. Can you guess? Don't Google it. Can you guess which is the granddaddy? What is the bias of all biases? Can you guess? Sandra, oh, welcome from Sweden. I'm so glad you're here. Tintu, you're from Oti, India? Uti, India? Did I pronounce that right? Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, who can tell me or even take a stab at what is the granddaddy, the bias of all biases. The biggest one, if we're going to look out for any bias, what should we look out for? All right, so don't let me forget. So put your answers in, and then I'll interject in a few minutes with what the right answer is. Today, we're going to talk about the cool findings and how you can apply them to your own life. The cool findings from the second half of the cool findings from the International Conference of Judgment and Decision Making. Stephen says confirmation bias. You get one chicken, but it is not the right answer exactly. It's related because all the biases relate to this granddaddy of biases. So, but you get one rubber chicken for answering, which is awesome because confirmation bias is probably a close second. All right. So I'm going to start with a little story. And then what I'm going to do is with each one, I'm going to ask, what is your intuition? Like, what do you think the research found? And then we'll talk about what the research found and then how to apply it to your own life. And we're just going to go through all of these. And let me apologize in advance because I'm really bad at pronouncing names on the fly. Really bad. So blanket apology if I botch your name or if I botch the name of the researchers, but I'm going to give it a shot. All right. So I ordered from, we ordered from takeout, a restaurant from takeout rather. We ordered takeout from a restaurant. Yeah, that. And we did it online and it asked for various tips. And tips have just gotten so big, but you feel like you want to give tips to support the restaurant workers, etc. And so on the takeout order form, it said tips. And it started with 25%, then it went down to 20, then it went down to 18, and then went down to 15. But I noticed that the order of the tip was that's usually 15%, 18%, 20%, 25%, if you get, or suggested. I hadn't seen 25% yet. But when it started with 25%, I was much more likely to consider an 18% tip for takeout that I was going to pick up, not deliver, than I would have if it started with 15%. So I was thinking about tips were kind of on my mind. And I know from Bob Cialdini's work that the order that you put things, that you offer things, has a great impact on how much you spend. So Hannah Hoover at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, looked at some tip suggestions. And she definitely found that these tip suggestions resulted in what? Did it make people tip less because they were irritated that people were suggesting 25%, or did it make them tip more? And while you're answering that, I'm going to say hi to Dr. Ahmed Mohammed Yusuf. Hi, welcome. So Tinchu says, yes, I pronounced it right. Uti is also popularly called Queen of Hill Stations. Okay, I love that. I hate to say this, Stephen, Queen of Hill Stations rivals your Pinot Paradise. So those are the two winners of describing where you're from. Now I'm going to have to go look up Queen of Hill Stations. Chi, hey, welcome, Chi. Welcome to Good Thinking. All right, so quick, back to the question. Do you think that offering these tip suggestions increases the amount you spend? Because, I wouldn't have thought about that. Or does it backfire? So does it increase or backfire? What's your guess? Because you could make an intuition for both, especially when you're dealing with 25%. It's like, really? 25%? That's a lot as a percentage of your total restaurant bill or taxi bill or whatever, Uber charge. What did tip suggestions suggest? Well, it turns out that suggestions of tips increases tips by a lot. So how could you apply this to your own life? Maybe you don't have a business or an opportunity to make tip suggestions, but understanding what these suggestions how could these apply to your own life? Maybe it's not a tip, but something else. So we have got, Egypt. Oh, Alexandria, Egypt. Aha, Dr. Ahmed Mohammed Yusuf from Egypt. Yay. All right. We're getting people from all over the world. And this is the brilliant thing about good thinking. Good thinkers from all over the world that cross-pollinate can bring ideas and perspectives. And then we're going to add this research in, and we need to have good thinking spread because we need it. All right. So that was a simple kind of experiment where you can test your intuition. All right. Okay, so Chi says, I think a good application might be salary negotiation. 100%. 100%. And we know the anchoring effect in any kind of salary negotiation. All right, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. Oh, Siba says optimism bias. I'm glad you said that. You get the rubber chicken, because now I'm going to reveal before, first I'll tell you a story of the anchoring effect and relate how it relates to these tips. And then I'm going to tell you what Daniel Kahneman says is the grandfather of all biases. All right. So we know I used to be in real estate, and people would often ask me, okay, what commission do you charge? And you're not supposed to say that there's a going commission or an acceptable rate of commission, but the market does settle sometimes on typical prices, like what a pen costs at the grocery store. So you kind of know. But every time I jokingly said 30%, and they would think I was joking, which I was, or they were appalled if they didn't know me well. They'd be like, 30% commission. Then later, when I said, no, it's 6%, I rarely had a negotiation off the 6%. However, when I said my commission is 6%, many times I had people say, well, is that negotiable? Will you take less? So just that, even that simple joking anchor had a huge effect on how much I negotiated off my actual number. Now that's just anecdotal, but it was powerful, and I probably did it. I certainly did it, hundreds of times over the course of many, many years in business. So that gives you an example of the power of how you can think about asking for tips or anchoring your salary negotiations, as Chi wisely indicated. All right, optimism bias. We're going to give the granddaddy of all biases, and Daniel Kahneman doesn't say confirmation bias. He doesn't say optimism bias, although it would be nice if he did. What did Daniel Kahneman call the granddaddy of all biases? The overconfidence bias. The bias which you think to yourself, well, wait a minute, I don't know, I feel imposter syndrome all the time. How can overconfidence bias be the granddaddy of all biases? Now, as we go through this research, think about how this overconfidence bias can make a starring appearance, even if it doesn't seem to be the main bias that you see at the kind of the obvious bias. So those of you who heard this overconfidence bias, see where this can be applied in the studies. All right, the next study. What site do you use to fact check articles? Like, do you use Truth or Fiction? That's one of the big sites. Or do you use Open Secrets? Or maybe if you're fact checking political facts, do you use PolitiFact? What site do you use to check? Maybe you don't. Maybe you see something and you think, I already trust that source. It's my trusted source. I'm not going to fact check it. So what source do you use? Most of us don't probably take the time to fact check every article that we read, but the ones that we think are really going to make an impact in our lives. And then the second question is, and this is a yes or no, do you have a politically balanced group of friends? Or do all of your friends tend to agree with you politically? And we've seen a lot of people, especially in the United States, during the last 4 years, and certainly during this election, where people were getting so polarized that people stopped, they would unfriend people on Facebook and really sequester to our political silos of sameness. So do you have a politically diverse group of friends? All right. Maybe you need to reconsider, because it turns out that Jennifer Allen from MIT presented this wisdom of the crowd study that found that a politically balanced group of 10 lay people, just people that are not political, strategists, given only the headline of an article, not even reading the whole article, but only the headline of an article, matched the performance of fact checkers researching the whole article. Now, the thing about this is that one of the things about presenting your research at a conference is people pick at it, and it's great because you find out all these confounding variables. But did you check for this? Well, no, we need to. And also it's suggested where further research needs to be conducted to really take away these nuggets in a meaningful way. But this does kind of hint to the fact that there is value to having a politically diverse group of friends. It's not always comfortable, but if you want to see the truth, if you want to see things as they really are, it's probably advantageous. All right. Pramod Das, it's an eye-opener. Yeah, it's an eye-opener. I don't know if you're referring to overconfidence bias, whatever, but think about overconfidence bias as we go through each of these. So if you do not have a politically diverse group of friends, then you probably need to get to do a little bit more fact checking on everything you believe in. It's going to become more and more apparent as I reveal some more of this research. All right. Xuan Zhao, and I'm horrible at, again, pronunciation, at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, looked at text-based communication generated by either humans or by bots. So this is becoming more and more common. You get some kind of text-based communication. You get your phone and you receive a text, and it's generated by human or it's generated by a bot. But there was one trick that made people believe a bot sent text more than they believe, rather, that a bot text was sent by a human. And it was one simple trick. I don't know how simple it was, but it was one trick. Can you guess the trick that was used to make a bot sent text seem more human? That's a hard question. Do you have any intuition? If anyone gets it, that's like an all the rubber chickens. Like that, you would get all the rubber chickens for that, because this is not an easy one. And I actually had to think, and I didn't get it. But when I heard it, just like when you hear the results of many things, then our brains go into clustering illusion and we start making, oh, that makes sense, because we start making patterns. Like when we hear the result, we think, oh, we knew it all along. So here is the communication. Respondents were more likely to perceive communication that was made and with corrected typos. They were more likely to believe that that came from a human. Spelling mistakes, Michael Morovitz. Spelling mistakes. Okay, that is absolutely the winner of all the chickens. I would have given you, okay, Michael, you might not care about rubber chickens, but that, you got it. Spelling mistakes is one of the errors. So that is definitely the winner of all the chickens for this research, because when they did not make or correct their typos, the respondents were more likely to disclose, actually, sorry, I want to make sure I get this right. When there were spelling mistakes and typos, they saw that as more human-like and warm, but no less competent. So just correcting those spelling errors, the bots were not perceived as less competent than communication that did not either make or correct the typos. And here's the other thing. When there were typos or spelling errors that were corrected, respondents were more likely to disclose personal information to the communicator, because corrected errors humanized communication. So this is good for your own research or your own use, but it's also good to be aware of responding to text messages that you think, oh, that must be human because that person corrected or had a spelling error. All right, so we've got Alexander, self-learning AI is the answer to human bots in the future, I believe. Yes, self-learning, but if the self-learning bot is so self-learning that they make no spelling errors, could that backfire? That's the issue. Could that backfire? All right, so that was a cool research. All right, now here's a good one. And I really want everyone, if you can, to think hard and put your intuition, share your intuition. All right, do you think that morality has declined over the last few years? Now, morality in this context, you can kind of generalize, but do you think that morality has declined over the last few years. Now, there are certain things where you say, I'm going to move this. I've got to reach over here and get the sun is in my eyes. You might think, well, premarital sex is much more acceptable now than it was, many years ago, and that's amoral. I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm talking about kind of universal morality, like lying and cheating and stealing. Do you think that morality has declined or has risen in the last few years? So put it in the chat. Put your intuition in the chat. It's risen or it's declined. Because Adam Mastroianni, I think I got that right, and Dan Gilbert, many of you might know Dan Gilbert at Harvard, conducted 5 empirical studies and 2 meta-analyses spanning 90 years and 40 countries. So this is a big, big cluster of studies to look at morality. And I'll tell you what they found out about moral decline. But first, I want some people to see. Let's just see. Ethics has taken a hit as well, Michael says. Alexander, morality just changed its nature. We are entering a new era with a new morality where different things matter, for sure. For sure on both. But what about the things, what about the things like honesty and cheating and those kinds of things? Do you think that there has been a decline? Well, through all of this study, I've got some good news, unless you're a pessimist. They found that, number one, the majority of people think that morality has declined. Like the significant majority of people, not you guys, because you guys seem to be a little bit, because you're good thinkers, you seem to be a little bit privy to kind of the nuances of this. But the majority of people, through these huge studies, both these meta-analysis studies and these empirical studies, felt that morality has declined. And this perception, however, is likely a major, major illusion, because morality indicators, by all measures of core morality, the ones that I was talking about, like honesty and cheating and stuff like that, essentially have not changed over time. And they also found that people think that this decline has been going on since they were born. Like they think, wow, back when I was young, people were more moral. So this is a very, I felt that this was a lot of data that went into the study. I thought it was a very robust study. And you also have to remember one thing, and I think this is helpful. I use this a lot. It's helpful to understand that bad does not equal worse. In other words, we can be on par as a human race morally, and things could still be bad that we need to work on. And when we see bad things, we don't need to categorize those bad things as worse. So bad and worse are not necessarily, they're not. They're just not necessarily. They're not the same. All right. I like that study because it was like some positive. Next one. Daniel Efron from the London School of Business. He looks at these repetition effects. And I think this is another interesting one for people who want to know the effect of information, this data deluge of information on how we make decisions. So his current projects focus on judgments of hypocrisy and fake news and what leads people to let leaders off the hook for dishonesty. Now, do we say, well, this person lies, but at least they're doing this, or this person might be a buffoon about this, but they're doing this? What makes us let leaders off the hook for dishonesty? So his research examined the psychology of, one, how people act in ethically questionable ways without feeling unethical, and then two, what shapes people's judgments of other people's unethical behavior. So let's say someone did something bad and it gets shared on social media. Well, if I share something that someone did bad and no one sees it and no one shares it and it doesn't go viral, it's just something that I think, right? But Efron found that the more we see bad behavior shared on social media, one of two things happen. So we see this, it spreads. We see someone did something bad, it spreads. Do we become, one, more outraged, or two, less outraged? Now you can see an intuition for both. Like, I keep hearing it over and over again and I'm over it. Like we get immune to it. Or we hear it more and more and more, and we cannot believe this person did it. Like maybe we see it each time that we see it, we think it's a new incident. We say, oh, there they go again, lying, versus seeing it over and over again and thinking, well, that's just the way things are. So the more we see bad behavior spreading on social media, are we more outraged or less outraged? You got to take a guess, because this is, to me, it's only obvious once you hear it. More outrage or less outrage? All right. So are we ready for the results? Drum roll, please. Efron found that the more people hear about a transgression, the more moral outrage will spread. But the more times an individual hears about it, the less outraged that person will be by the behavior. So bad deeds seem more ethical when they're repeatedly encountered. And maybe that's to your point, Alexandra, where you said, it just changes its nature. So the more we see it, now it turns out that the same effect was not found for good deeds. Like repeated sharing of a good deed or good behavior wasn't found to change how we perceive that behavior. So Michael says less outrage due to it becoming the norm. Michael, you're winning today. Less outraged, absolutely. So there's a spread effect where more people are outraged, but there's an individual effect where people are desensitized. And Barry, you say desensitization. Chickens, welcome. I'm glad you're here as well. All right. So happy to see you. All right. So earlier research even found that repetition can make us believe things that we know are not true. For example, I'm not talking about things that are kind of subjectively true. I'm talking about things like a fact where people were told the Atlantic Ocean is the largest ocean. And over time, repetition in different contexts, even when people had indicated that they knew the Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean, but repetition over time increased the veracity, the truthiness of the statement. So beware of having repetition not only desensitize you, but make you believe something is more true. Now, on the flip side, how can you use repetition to convince others of the truth and hopefully convince others of something that's ethically true, not manipulating people? But you think about how you can use repetition strategically in your life, but you can also think about how to avoid letting repetition lead you astray. All right. And desensitize you to things that you shouldn't be desensitized to. So those are the two things. Now, this one gets to that whole believing is seeing. Now, remember, are you thinking about the overconfidence bias in all of these? Because it definitely plays a starring role in all of them if you really think about it. The granddaddy of all biases. All right. If you're just tuning in, I want to do a little rotation where I don't know, some word that you use to say that you can find good thinking on YouTube. So if you subscribe to my channel, Becky Saltzman, YouTube, and then you can manipulate that little bell to get notifications. And then also on LinkedIn Live. So we're YouTube Live and LinkedIn Live, Good Thinking, most Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So just a little shout out if you're midway through, because we're about to wrap up. This one is the believing is seeing. So Bing Bang, Dennis Zhang, and Fuqing Zhang at Washington University in St. Louis. Yay, Washington University, my alma mater. And Heng Chen Dai of UCLA Anderson School of Management looked at whether decisions that algorithms make magnify inequality or make things more fair. Now, this is a big one because more and more of our decisions are going to be made by algorithms. And we know that if bias goes into algorithms, even unknowingly, bias can come out of algorithms. So in two field experiments conducted in China in Alibaba's factories, workers receive their pick list. So this is a list of, you get this list and you have to go pick the things off the shelf for shipping. So it's called a pick list. And they either got it from a human or from an algorithm. So they would have, this human would select it. Now, the pick lists were exactly the same. So the method of picking the pick lists was only perceived to be done by a human or by an algorithm. But which list do you think the workers thought was more fair? The pick list that came from the human or the pick list that came, a human decision maker, or the pick list that came from the algorithm decision maker? Which one do you think workers, the pickers in the factory, felt was more fair? All right. They were all randomized, but it turns out that this could be, I'm going to give you an intuition for both, because a lot of people think that algorithms aren't fair. They don't take into consideration everything. So this is an example of maybe people thought, the algorithms aren't fair because the human would know that I'm faster, stronger, better, whatever. Or you might think the algorithms aren't fair because they can't cure, they couldn't, co-favor from, relationships or slipping some money or whatever for better pick lists. But it turns out that the algorithm decisions were perceived as fairer. But here is where it really was interesting to me. So the algorithm decisions were perceived as fairer, but also resulted in higher levels of productivity. So productivity measured by how fast you pick things, etc. So not only were the algorithms statistically significantly perceived as fairer, but they also resulted in higher levels of productivity. So you can see that there's this double-edged sword with algorithm decisions and human decisions. And the key is how you present these decisions. Like if you are running a business, how do you present the fairness of algorithm decisions? How do you make sure that they're fair? How do you present the fairness of what I call good thinking decisions or human decisions? So these are kinds of things where your intuition may or may not apply. So Chi says the algorithm decision was seen as fairer. Absolutely. Could be that they thought that the algorithm was more objective. Absolutely. Michael says objective. But there are so many cases and so many studies where people think the opposite. Like they're blaming the algorithm. I'm going to give you a book suggestion as we're wrapping up. We're already 1 minute over, so we got to quickly wrap it up. I promise. I always try to make it 30 minutes or under. Hello World. I really recommend this book. I think it's fantastic. Written by Hannah Fry, Being Human in the Age of Algorithms. Hello World. You want to get into the realm of decision making and algorithms, highly recommend this book. All right. Probably we have to wrap it up. There was the winner of the poster contest, but that really gives you what I think is the second chunk of highlights for the International Conference for Judgment Decision Making. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you join all the other good thinkers from around the world every Monday, well, almost every Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific time here on LinkedIn Live and on YouTube. Becky Saltzman, subscribe to the channel. 9 a.m. Pacific time, US, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Have a great holiday. Happy holidays if you celebrate. And see you next Monday. Have a great week.